Let's do our blessing for soaking our psyches in words of Torah. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam asher kidshanu b'mitzvotav v'tzivanu la'asot b'divrei Torah. Amen.
Amen.
Thanks for joining us, and thanks for coming back after all these sessions. I'd like to begin today by where we ended last time. And so I want you to soak your minds not in new material to start, but in previous material. So, how can I put this? If on some level Kabbalah is trying to change your way of viewing reality as not a collection of things or static objects, but really at their heart a collection of processes, and that God's name essentially is a version of the word becoming, is trying to see the becoming of things. So the divine perspective on things is as processes rather than as things. Very Buddhist in a way, and that's why there are real connections. I don't mean historical, but I mean often when one follows a certain set of axioms forward, philosophically, they'll arrive at the same conclusions as people who followed that set before. But the idea that your cognitive mechanism works in a certain way, and that it's not always your friend, and that, as Wittgenstein said about philosophy, and I tend to agree, and philosophers hate this, is that philosophy is about letting the fly out of the fly bottle. The problem is that you put the fly in there. It's not that reality put the fly in there, meaning that, so for example, as I've mentioned last time, I used to take courses in seminars on things like, what is the good? Well, you just assume by your sentence there is something called the good. How can we define the good and set the conditions of the good? That's putting a fly in the fly bottle. And Wittgenstein said in a lot of ways you've succeeded at philosophy when you've ended philosophy. And he encouraged his students to get real jobs, which was very controversial at Cambridge. So that he said that the profession of professional philosopher is not a suitable or noble profession for anyone. Because you're basically like, let's put some flies in fly bottles. Now let's figure out a way to get them out. And it's like, well, why don't you go, one of his students became like a bricklayer. Like, thank you, you're now actually building something useful. So our brains can fool us into thinking things, and as I said, there are ways in which our ego is actively at work and our mechanism is going. So let's think for a moment about examples of it's endless. It's every day, it's every moment, seeing things as processes rather than things. But I ended last time with some examples, and let's just do a few to get our juices flowing. Larry just threw me one just a second ago in the hallway. I'm going to use Larry's, right? So the word, and Larry, I'm going to manipulate it. The word Shem, or meaning name, right? A name is a thing, right? You've got a name. It's a holy name. It's a thing. It describes you. Okay, that sounds very like my cognitive mechanism leading me astray. My name defines me. So Larry said, well, in biblical Hebrew, and this is very important in the prayers, so I talked about it a lot, Shem really means reputation. So that it's like today it's gone out of fashion, which is the most important thing I need to know about you is your family name, right? Rav comes home and says, I've met someone, binary, non-binary, male, female, I don't care, and they're going to be my mate for life. Right? I'm less concerned about their gender. I'm concerned about their name, meaning their family name. Where do you come from? What kind of people do you come from? And so the name is really a reputation is based on a process. How does that family move in this world? How do you move in this world? So a name in a way is a process. It's not a thing. You could say it's your character, but it's like, and it's surprisingly accurate, because we always think in terms of individuals. What does it matter what family they came from? Are you going to now question me about their ethnicity or whether they were born in America? And I'm like, no. Sometimes identity stuff is getting too thing-like. It's like, I'm not saying what's their identity. I'm saying like, what do they think is the way to move in this world? So a reputation is based on your character over time. Right? So how do I know whether, we're in Little House on the Prairie, right? And, and you're Laura Ingalls, and you bring someone home, and I'm Pa or Ma, and I'm like, so are you going to give me your word? Your word means, like, are you the kind of person that keeps your word over time? Are you the kind of person who breaks your word? It's part of a process. Like, are you the kind of person who does these kinds of things over time? Not in this moment, are you telling me the truth? You're not telling me the truth. It's kind of part of the philosophy of saying, there's no such, is this a good action or is that a bad action? You're still obsessed with this thing called the action, rather than, like, over time, Aristotle says you're the kind of person that is honest, or the kind of person that does good things, not like breaking it down into units. Let's use another example, so last time I said creation. So for the rabbis, creation, it's not a one-time event. It's happening in every moment. It's a becoming. So you can use an example from last time. Someone, use your brain. How is creation happening in every moment? How, in a modern language, how is nature not a thing? Can you give me an example of, like, how is nature a process and it's not a thing? Because creation, and they use the word creation to mean that. It's what we call, the trees and the fields and the ecosystem. That's when, in biblical language, creation is what you and I call nature, capital N. So how is nature a process?
Photosynthesis.
Photosynthesis. Thank you.
Hard to say.
No, you said it quite well. Absolutely. I mean, okay, I'll just leave it. Anybody else?
The seasons?
The seasons. Nice. Interesting. That reminds me of a profound Jewish point.
I'm visualizing it as a time-lapse photograph of, of something growing and coming out, emerging from the earth and dying and withering back down.
I love that. Did anybody ever see the last episode of 6 Feet Under? Like, I love 6 Feet Under was a very good show. It had some good, the odd seasons were good, the even seasons were bad. But when it got to, like, I think number 6, they ended it with a time lapse that just brought me to tears. I mean, it was because it really shifted your perspective away. Like, it really went to a mystical place where you're like, you're starting not to see, I like these characters, I like Granny, and I like the rebellious teenager. And then by time-lapsing all of them, you were like, just taking this place away from the characters to, we're part of this larger thing, story, process. Anybody else?
Food web?
What?
The food web?
The food, what's the food web?
Like all the animals that eat other animals and are
Oh,
connected
yeah.
to each other. I mean, you're not just meat or an eater, you're both at the same time at different times.
And that, and the eating, and and that goes to burial, you know what I mean? The fact that, you go in the earth. I've told you before, Lynn can't stand the images of, like, worms eating you, and I'm like, come at me, baby. I'm like, I want to go back into the earth. I want to be a flower. And I love it when people say things and they say it's true, that we're breathing the same air that the dinosaurs breathed and exhaled. And I'm like, really? Are you making that up? And they're like, no, I'm not making it up. I love that stuff. I gave an example. So I was working with teenagers today. I probably gave it to you last time. So I know I gave it to you last time, but I think I can say it better and quicker now. Get us soaked in the mood of Torah. How is it possible that you have two different people who are taking their basket of pomegranates to the temple, right? So one person takes their basket, you leave the temple. In Deuteronomy, it gives you the passage you say. It's preserved today in the Haggadah. Say it at the Seder, which is, my father was a wandering Aramean. And you have this little soliloquy or whatever you do, and then you walk away. You did your duty. You brought your pomegranates. It's time to go home. So one person does it. They bring the pomegranates. Yes, ancestors for this, and here's my tithe. And then someone else goes in. They put their box of pomegranates down, or their basket. They say the same thing, but for them it's a totally different experience. Why? Because one person's like, they make me pay 10%. Here's my 10%. Sure, it's my price. It's ordinary. My price of being a citizen, or whatever it is. I get something out of it, social contract or something. But the other person is seeing something else, which is, I know I said before, forgive me. you can own, you know, you can own, I probably won't work, but you can own the land. Although none of us really own land according to the Torah, but let's just say for the moment you own the land. And you can own the tree, all right? And you can own the pomegranate. So why is it that you have to give a 10% tithe or the first fruits or the poor tithe? Like, is it the social contract? Is it because you have to, so your neighbors won't like you anymore? Or is it because you own that, and you own that, but you don't own the process of growing fruit, photosynthesis, all of it? Like a Kabbalist is like, what's the becoming going on? You know, there's sap going up and their roots shooting out and their nutrients being brought in, and there's photosynthesis. There's literally like light being turned into calories, right? You didn't create that. You don't own that. So the most important thing is not the ground or the tree or the pomegranate. The most important thing is the invisible process of nature, the invisible process of God. That's creation happening in the moment. And it's the same thing with an animal. So when you get to like Leviticus chapters 16, 17, and 18, they're like, one person says, okay, I'm going to eat my goat, slit the throat of the goat, the blood pours out. Sorry, God, it's my atonement is that I'm doing this at the altar. But another person's like, I own the goat, I own the other goat, I own the two goats they made, and I'm just doing this because, like I have to. But then the mystical person is saying, I didn't create life. I didn't create the process of reproduction. So like one person doesn't get it because they see the world through objects, and another person is creation is an ongoing process. Someone asked me this, I was talking with, I'll say because he's brilliant, it was Toby. So I was talking to Toby, Toby was like, totally, we're jamming about this, and he's like, are you saying that process is God? Or is that process owned by God? I'm like, well, a Kabbalist, I think, would say, don't put the fly in the fly bottle again. Like, let's not get too confused by our own words. What does it matter? Let's just say it's God. But, it's this process, the creation is unfolding, is part of the becoming that God is. And yeah, go ahead.
Oh, sorry to interrupt, but
Really? No, I love it.
You were talking about how Shem, meaning a name, is a
Yeah.
process and a reputation, and it's funny because Hashem means God, we use Hashem to mean God, but then Hashem also, the word name often, it means object, like, in French, nom, it means name and noun, so it's just kind of a funny play on words, that it means the one thing and its opposite.
I've spoken about this sometimes on High Holy Days, but sometimes I think I'm too arcane or sort of abstruse, is that cryptic's probably a better word. One of the reasons we're always talking about God's name is because the tradition is that since God is invisible becoming, the only way people will know God's reputation is through Judaism. It's not very ecumenical. Or you say our God. Toby and I were also talking about there are other gods, and Micha Mocha, God's the best one of all, who are these others? Bottom line is, though, that it's a very deep concept, because the only way God's name is known in the world, according to the tradition, is through our behavior. And it's really ultimately that people look at Jews and be like, I really like what they're doing. Who's their God again? It's the process of how we conduct ourselves that generates God's reputation, because we're Jews. And the same thing, which is we can take a course on what is the Christian God, but in a way, the way the Christian God is, look at what Christians do, because really they're representing the reputation of their deity. So it's less about theology and more about behavior. Go ahead.
So just an annoying comment.
I love it.
So one problem is that the two people with the goat have the same reputation, because we observe their actions. And that's a good reason not to be too confident about the inferences we make from reputation.
Nicely said.
Annoying. I know.
What? No, I don't disagree. Well, the thing is, I think that, what a Kabbalist was, so for anyone who's watching the recording, that Rob saying that, but we're so easily fooled. We can watch one person bring the goat, it's like, it's my taxes, or I read Rousseau, or John Stuart Mill, and another person who's like, you guys, do you really get that divinity is, like, as I told Toby, I don't think the first person gets mitzvah. You know how we throw around the word mitzvah like it means a good deed? And then people like me scream and holler, and I say there's a reason there's no mitzvah board at the Beth Israel Religious School. It's not a good deed board, because what mitzvah really means is you are absolutely required. You feel the commandedness that, like, have to. Like, not I have to because I'm being forced to. I have to because I didn't create life. So I didn't create, like, I can own the flesh of the animal, but I don't own the life. And that's not just some simple law that I'm following. Like, it's about the nature of reality. So I'd say, and Rob's saying, but you can be fooled. They both look the same on the outside. You slice in the neck, the blood goes out, and you wouldn't see it. And I think you're right. I think in a way what the Kabbalists might say, and of course there are many different ones, so I'm sure one of them would agree, out of it, is that, you know a true tzaddik when you see one. Like, it takes one to know one, which is, I can tell which ones get it, and I can tell which ones don't. Or you could just say that over time, you would observe that they are unifying the energies rather than channeling the dark side. Liz?
I'm thinking about this, that the war in Gaza illustrates, the Jewish God and how the Israelis are acting, and the Islamic God in terms of how the Gazans, the Muslims are acting.
Well, I know. It's always controversial to bring up something that's so sensitive for all of us, but if I could soften it a little bit, is that obviously I don't want to say all Muslims agree with Hamas, and I wouldn't want to say all Israelis agree with the way Netanyahu is prosecuting the conflict. But I would say it tells me about Hamas's religion, and I think it's important. I agree.
And the Jewish religion.
And the Jewish religion. Exactly. I think it does. Or at least the religion of those Jews who are conducting it this way. No, go ahead.
From God to religion.
Oh, I'm sorry. Did you say religion?
I said God.
God. It tells me who the Hamas God is. And it tells me. Right, I just want to say that I don't want to say every Muslim agrees with that. You know what I mean? Yeah.
It tells you I think it tells about the Islamic God, the God of Islam and the God of Judaism.
So, go ahead. Oh, wait. No, Carol.
I am interpreting you do not own the mitzvah.
You do not own the. Well, I was just saying the mitzvah is that when you.
No, but it's related to this picture.
How do you not own the mitzvah? No, tell me. You do not own the mitzvah.
That's why you don't have a mitzvah board.
Oh,
it's the
gotcha.
same thing.
Right.
But using that, relating it to a thing like a tree, you can't own it. It's the process of doing it.
Oh, that was more literary.
Yes.
Yes, got it now. One thing I'll just relate back to make it clear is just I have no problem with a Gemilut Chasadim board, acts of chesed. I think it should be a chesed board. But why is it, to me it's an anti-Kabbalistic thing to be like, you did a good, if I say, if someone says, I don't know, like, I truly feel for the life of the animal that gave itself up so that I could eat this, right? Or something like that. Like for a Kabbalist, like, that's because you're seeing reality. You don't get extra credit for that. It's just weird, to be like, but, so it's kind of like, why is this extra credit? You could even say, do we get a mitzvah board up for praying 3 times a day? You're only literally required to pray twice a day. But, you're such a good person, you're so holy, you pray twice a day. But it's like, I get extra credit for the fact that I'm supposed to think about something larger than myself for 10 minutes a day. Like, that's extra credit? Like, are we really supposed to be, like, is it normal to think about yourself all day? Your own needs and needs of your family. Instead of, because the prayers are like, let there be peace in Israel, let there be the sick being taken care of. More hands.
I
Oh,
just had a
in the room.
comment. You said you apologize for twisting my words a little bit. Well, you kind of did twist them because
Yeah.
when I spoke to you aside, I said that the meaning of a hiye could really mean you'll find out what I am. You'll
Oh,
find
no,
out what
right,
I am
no.
when you see what I do. When
Exactly.
you see what I'm gonna do.
And so which I brought up briefly last time as kind of a simple way of, in other words, you'll see who I am, which in the context of the Peshat could be, when I do the plagues, you'll see I'm a powerful God. So tell them they're gonna see. Well, when they ask what your name is, say, you'll see,
You'll find
because,
out.
but on a deep level, you could say that's not, as I said with Kabbalah, they combine Peshat, Drash, Remez, and Sod. Like, they don't want to leave any of them out on some level, but they'd say, you see, it's even still there. That's true for all of us, right? It's kind of, I'd like to use these homes fun examples. I think that's why I became a rabbi. It's kind of like when, a kid gets into college and everyone's like, oh, throw a party. Like, it's such a great achievement, right? I'm like, it's not an achievement. It's like an invitation. Like, you're not Cinderella. You haven't gone to the ball yet. In other words, it's like, it'd be like, what are you going to do with this opportunity? But you haven't achieved anything yet. You know what I mean? You've just gotten in. And I know we see it. I just feel like we're always overpraising these things as if they're achievements, right? Oh my gosh, you did your homework. Like, put it on the mitzvah board. You know what I mean? And I'm like, whatever happened to,
It all
It
depends on-
seems to me that
Yeah.
it's actually more than that.
Yeah.
If you consider the fact that, as you said last week, these mitzvahs have reverberations across the universe, across
Yeah.
time, that they bring Moshiach, that there's a scale, and in fact, that mitzvah did weigh the scale towards the coming of Moshiach in a sooner time. May it be soon and in our time.
That's right.
Well,
And I agree. I mean, and in some ways, that pond that we're in, it's also like, what we call privilege today, which is a very true concept. But it's like the fact that I'm only here because of the way people have tipped the scales in the past, right? You know what I mean? And so I'm obligated to continue the work, as Rabbi Tarfon says, because of the consequences of my actions, that they're so immense. Ron, you had your hand up a long time ago.
You've talked about mitzvah as being an obligation,
Yeah.
but I work with so many kids on their mitzvah projects, and
They
I
don't.
never wanted them to consider it an obligation, but it was more, is there a conflict, or are we using the wrong word?
I mean, I'm not trying to be a jerk about, but I think we're definitely using the wrong word. I was kind of around in California when some of these nonprofits got the whole mitzvah project thing going, and they were, teen philanthropy and all this stuff. And, I felt I had a friend who was heavily involved in it full time. I just felt like it's a little bit of overpraising of teens. I know it's trying to get them to give back, but I talk to Deborah Ball about this all the time. She loves the concept of chesed, and it's a chesed project, which is good. Or you could say tikkun olam. We're trying to make the world a better place. I don't think that's mitzvah. You could say, well, aren't we commanded to make the world a better place? Well, now you're starting to expand everything. So isn't everything a verb? Yes, or I don't know. But I agree. I think the word mitzvah is wrong. I think it works as a bar mitzvah and stuff like that. But I don't know. If a kid says, what a great mitzvah project is to take a child who never got to be 13 at the time of because of the Holocaust, and to remember them in the service. It's a nice, simple project. I think it's very beautiful. You don't have to start a nonprofit to save a small continent. But I would say that it's not a mitzvah. You don't have to come to Saturday morning services and remember a child who died in the Holocaust never got a chance to have a bar mitzvah. I would say it's chesed. It's thinking of others. And it's gimilut chasadim, for sure. And Zevi.
I think that about mitzvah and about this achievement that you're talking about, it really depends on the horizon that you're looking at.
Mhm.
Because if you're looking at a 5 years horizon, 10 years horizon, 50 years horizon, your achievement and what's a mitzvah, like this college thing, okay? If your horizon is relatively short. Well, good for you. You managed to get into college. Now let's see. We get to this and let's see what your achievement in college are, and then we'll see if it's doable or not. So, if you look at a 50-year horizon, then yeah, you got into college, big deal, let's see.
Well,
what
I'm
you
not trying to
do.
put it down, I mean.
No, but I think that it really depends on how far you're looking to determine whether an achievement is really an achievement.
That's true. We say Mazal Tov, you know what I mean? And probably know Mazal Tov means good fortune,
Good
right?
stars.
Right, good stars. I mean, originally Mazal really in rabbinic thought refers to your horoscope. So it means your stars. And that comes back into Kabbalah. So it all will relate. But, so when you say Mazal Tov, you're kind of saying, oh, your stars aligned, but also good luck. I mean, in the future. A lot of times we really mean to say Kol HaKavod, which is you deserve the honor. And we say the wrong thing.
Well,
I'm-
Shi'eh Lecha Mazal Tov. I
I'm,
mean, you have good stars.
right, exactly. In other words, good luck at college, right?
It's like Kitzur, it's short.
So let's just do a little more in terms of this idea. So I really think, okay, let me ask you this. This is a deep question, hard one. You don't have to have an answer, maybe a thought process. Has there ever been a situation in your life where you saw something, I use that word thing. It's the language that gets us. You saw something as a process and it really helped you. It really changed your perspective into a more holy perspective. Is there any time where something like you realized something was a process and it helped you see it aright or better?
I think of parenting, it's like, you can make a mistake in a moment and feel really bad about it, but it's really not, it's all the moments, and it's how the moments connect rather than any one particular thing you did or didn't do. And you have unlimited opportunities to make it better.
I love that. Parenting is a process.
We don't know if it's unlimited yet.
No, absolutely. I also, when I thought a lot of articles on parenting I've read as I went through it, they're always like, here are the 3 tricks, or here's, and I think Kabbalistically, which is, there's no, it depends on the moment. I'll just keep it simple. In other
Even
words,
parenting.
that's great depending on who the kid is, who you are, and even those things depend on who in the moment you are, right? And that's, as I said, with chesed and gevura. If you're like, something, you got to make them pick up after themselves. Not every single time. So like, people want to reduce it, but it's really this, I love the way you said about the process and you making mistakes and people often say to me, which I think is really sweet, considering how few regulars we have on Saturday, but people say, I'm really sorry, I missed Saturday services. And there's one coming up next week. Like, don't feel bad. It's, like Shabbat is a process. It's not a thing. Dan.
This is a little bit different perhaps, but what Liz just said about our God versus somebody else's God was very disturbing to me. But as I heard it, as I was listening to the words, I thought of that as a process. I don't take what you just said as the end-all and be-all of your thought about that, or the conversation in this room about that. And so I noted it. I didn't comment on it. Oh, wait a second, I did.
But I love that, Dan, because,
I didn't rise to it, I didn't take the bait, I didn't.
Yes.
But I did just think of it as a
Yeah.
process, a thought process.
right, because what fools us is freezing something. It's like snapshot, I'm going to keep that in mind, whether it's, like what Liz just said. You just said, think of it as a process. I mean, I often think of even philosophy and, I don't want to insult any professors here, and Liz, I'm definitely not insulting you. No, I'm not insulting any professors, but one of the things that really amazed me about academia, that just made me feel like, what's going on here, is that I was in religious studies and philosophy. Clearly, people through their work were trying to work out their own sense of religion. So I'd be like, every field, right. So I'd be like, so what are you studying? And I'm like, I'm studying Japanese Buddhism. And I just spent 2 years studying in Japan. And I was like, oh, it's purely academic. right? And then they write articles as if I'm just an objective scholar. I'm like, no, you're someone trying to work out your own stuff. You know, like, which is nothing wrong with. In other words, philosophy, academia is a form of creativity. It's a form you're playing upon your instrument. You're a process of moving through this. And some people, these grad students I've been working with, they're like, they didn't want to talk about the obviously psychological aspect of it, which is, then why are you devoting your life to these ideas and learning this language? Like, is it another example of process, and we'll go to Eric, but I'll mention my Yom Kippur sermon from this year on story, which is, the older I get, the more I consider my life a process, and who I am is a process. And part of what I was saying on Yom Kippur about narrative identity is that the more you practice narrative identity, I realized the answer I gave in this interview, and then 5 years earlier, like the answer I gave at that dinner party when people said, who are you, tell me your story. And you start to realize, my story changes a lot. My story used to be a different story, and now it's another story. And I can just move one element of my story around, like I'm gonna drop off all of that, and I'm just gonna add this one thing. And it changes like your whole identity. And I was thinking, that's narrative identity. You construct your identity through trying to connect your past, your present, and your future into some kind of little story, often really quick. You're at a dinner party, standing on one foot, who are you, Nadav? I was born to a rabbi, and I did this, and I did that, and I was making up for my mother's issues, but then this thing happened, or I taught Hebrew High, and I'm a rabbi, right? But the older I get, the more I realize, wait, I've constructed so many stories that maybe this thing we call human identity is a little bit of a fly in a fly bottle. Like, it's a little bit of a trap. Like, we're all so full of our own stories and so full of our own identities. They're probably much more maybe it's better just to say, Nadav, who are you? I'm going to process. I could identify some past points, and I could construct a little picture, look like a little dinosaur or a dog, because there's this point, this memory, that thing that happened to me, and I can put together 8 points, be a great story, pour me another glass of wine, tell me yours. But the truth is that, like, is it even necessary? Like, I mean, it's kind of quasi-Buddhist, but I'm a process. Like, do I really need to make up an identity right now so that we all have a good conversation? We're all more comfortable when you can tell me your story. And I mean, who knows why I do what I do? I'm making up a reason why I do what I do. The bottom line is I'm doing what I'm doing. It is quasi-Buddhist, but it's also common sense. But it gets there when you start seeing yourself as a process. Like, maybe the next time, I don't know, Meg says, I was having coffee today with someone at Socotra, right? Tell me your story. I'm like, I'll skip it. This is what I do now. I mean, but you know what? They wanted to talk about themselves anyway, right? I mean, who doesn't, right? I'm like, so my story's not so important anymore, but it's partly coming from realizing I'm a process. Let's just,
I am that I am.
Right, I will be what I will be, and I was what I was. Yes, are you saying there's no connection? I can draw a connection. There are 100 different ways to draw those connections, right? Narrative therapy is your connection always sounds like a tragedy. Maybe we could retell the story where it sounds like a success, because you'll be a happier person. It's the same story, just maybe told a little differently. I said in the Yom Kippur sermon, I learned from a friend of mine who's a Zen Buddhist scholar and an I Ching scholar, which will relate to the end of today's class, that sometimes you just gotta laugh at like the bad stuff that's happened to you. Because in order to, you gotta laugh at life, like the Zen master is a little bit like, it's all ridiculous. Like human beings are ridiculous, you're ridiculous, we're ridiculous, whoever promised you anything but ridiculous. Sometimes you have to just be sometimes you just have to, this is the way he put it to me. He has a very thick accent because he's Romanian. He says, Nadav, sometimes you have to just stop and enjoy the show. Like, just enjoy the show, like kind of with a Buddhist detachment. So in other words, we retell our stories in different ways. Like, it can be helpful to tell your story in a positive way if you're depressed, because it can kind of like make you see things you didn't see. But otherwise, it's all a lot of stories pieced together through, these pieces. Eric, finally. Eric's like, I totally forgot.
Yeah, I guess for me, it was just the realization that the whole world is a process.
Yeah.
That there is no now, that it's basically the past becoming the future, like right in front of our eyes, and there are no. And that's like, I think this is a Buddhist idea too, but that the source of a lot of our suffering is wanting to keep things fixed in time.
Correct,
to
and
make
source
them
of-
never are. So,
The source of the suffering, living in the past, wanting things to stay the way they
Yeah.
are. You know, one of the things that frustrates me both by the right and the left, just to be more controversial than Liz was with Gaza, is you know, like the right seems to think that that America can be what it was before, and the left seems to think that what America is terrible. And I'm like, well, it's a process. America is not going to be the same as it was in 1950. Which is a good thing, you know, but it's also like America doesn't need to be thrown out and destroyed. Like I told you, I was like, you know, listening to sometimes, you know, the dates you overhear in Ann Arbor, capitalism is evil, it's so terrible. Do you want a cappuccino or a vanilla latte? You know, like, I mean, like, you're like pretending you can throw out America because it's racist and bad and unfair. But America is a process. The idea of America is in process. And so, there's a lot here. We could do even more, and maybe next time we'll open with this as well, because honestly, redemption and revelation are also important contemporary processes. But you did great, and as a reward, we will now read a Kabbalistic text. So the next Kabbalistic text comes from, I was going to do it on Shabbat, when we talked about Kabbalah Shabbat, and I said, when we did that Chesed, I should have quizzed you. Friday night is the attribute of Chesed. Saturday morning, you pass into Gevura, you go from Chesed to Gevura, and then by a kind of Saturday afternoon, you head into Tiferet, and I showed you that that's true in the very rare case that I think you only get for Shabbat, which is the Amidah for Shabbat changes at each of the three services. It doesn't for holidays, and it doesn't for even for holidays, it doesn't happen. But showed you the progression there, so we did a lot. But I never told you what happens at midnight on Friday night. So we're now reading from the Zohar. We haven't done a lot. Well, no, we've done some primary texts. I don't want to cut myself. I need to make a disclaimer, which is Zohar is very hard. And I don't claim to understand it perfectly. Or I don't, maybe not even much. I don't want to get into the whole history of the Zohar. You can read about it. But the Zohar is the longest mystical work. It used to be called the main Kabbalistic work. I don't know if we have to privilege it that way. It was, I could get this wrong, so I'm doing this from memory. It was largely written / compiled in Sfat in Israel. It's attributed to Shimon Bar Yochai, but forget all that. The mystics like to attribute things to other things. I go by the theory that it was lots of loose leaf pieces of paper written by lots of different people. That it was an experiment in a sense. I don't want to say an ecstatic writing. It was an experiment in like communal writing, where it was written by many thinkers. And so it's not like a normal published work where there's a beginning, middle, and end. And also it's not consistent. There's not consistency across Kabbalistic works in general, which is why scholars have a whole field. They can write dissertation about this village in France and this other one that was like 5 miles away. It was totally different evolution of Kabbalah in the two, because there's a lot of differences in Kabbalah. So the Zohar is very, very long. It's a lot of material. It has a lot of imagination in it. It's not trying to explain anything. It's just trying to describe the world, and it is in reading it, I won't say it's transitioning. I am transitioning us into a different Kabbalah course right now, which is a less accessible version to me of Kabbalah. I want to make this quick because I know you want to read the text. Maybe I'll do this after we read the text. But
Less acceptable to you?
It's yes. No, that was a great question. It's less accessible to me.
Oh, accessible.
Accessible.
I thought you said
Can someone tell me the time? I want to make sure I use our time. well.
Quarter after 7.
Whose translation is this?
This is Tishbe, Isaiah Tishbe. So, let's the fastest way to do this. And give me 3 minutes on this, and then we'll read it. I did this after I think Liz was on there. For a few people who stayed after one of the classes, we had this discussion. Okay, so if you've heard it, you've heard it. I think a helpful schema to understand intellectual thought, especially about highly abstract matters like God, is the schema that's known as the Aristotelian versus the Platonic or Neoplatonic. I do think it's a helpful way to think about it. Aristotelian thought, standing on one foot, is the idea that to understand how the world works in life, you start by living life. And you kind of figure out how the world works by going along. And it involves theoria, it involves theoretical knowledge. And so Aristotle refers to like a doctor. Yes, a doctor studies anatomy. We have communal theoretical knowledge we want to pass on. But ultimately, doctors learn by they study that, but then they go through doctoring. And they realize things that work and things that don't. And they realize that you can't just study the book because in any one moment, there's so much going on. There's the person's personality, and there's the digestion, and there's this, and there's that. And so it's a very kind of holistic thing that a good doctor is someone that shows good judgment. And good judgment can't be done by a machine because there are too many factors coming in. And that's why doctors might say different things for different people. But life is, if I say, let's go study some Talmud. Judaism today is very Aristotelian. It's like, I'm not saying any of you are living your lives wrong. We're all human beings, we're all Yidden, we're all trying to get by. But let's study a piece of Gemara, a piece of Talmud, and maybe we get an insight that helps us live better. It would be like we're all doctors. Let's have a mini conference. What's going on with you? What's going on with you? Let's look at this brilliant text we got about something, and maybe this will help you be a better doctor. Maybe it will help you be a better Jew. Maybe you'll see life a little different. Maybe I can go home and see processes instead of things. That was really nice. Life is in media res. We're in the middle of things, and we're trying to figure out and get better than we were. And the other view is there is a blueprint to reality that underlies everything. And if you understand the blueprint, for not reality, the blueprint, everything becomes clear. Astrology is like that, which is you think you know what life is going on, you don't understand it because it's all the stars. And it's all based about the fact that Aquarius is in Mercury right now and you didn't even know, right? And so there's this other structure that's controlling you, that's the real thing. In some ways we're all puppets and we're being manipulated. In Platonic or Neoplatonic thought, there are a perfect ideal reality that everything else is like a poor imitation of. So if only I can show you the invisible perfect world, that this is just a perfect triangle that I can show you in math, the perfect Platonic triangle. In real life, triangles are imperfect. In real life, circles are imperfect. But the perfect circle is what's pi, blah, 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 with pi. So that math is perfect. But unfortunately, the things we make using math are so darn imperfect. So the Platonic view is only if you could get to the math of it, the perfection, the underlying order, and everything else is a messy version of it. But that'll really help you understand reality rather than just trying to learn, well, I've been studying the messy version and I picked up a few things. The rabbis transform our religion from Israelite national religion to an Aristotelian form to a new form that's based on Aristotle. They take Aristotelian or Greek schools of thought. Pythagoras has a school, Epicurus has a school, the Stoics have a school. They're all versions of more or less similar philosophy. But if you go to Pythagoras, Epicurus, he'll teach you this way. If you go to Socrates, Socrates will teach you this way. So what do the rabbis do? The temple's destroyed, they start up schools. You have Hillel, you have Shammai, it's all Judaism, but kind of different. And you go there and you learn how to do it and you practice it. And then you have discussions about it. All of that kind of adopted from Aristotle. Basically, Rabbinic Judaism is copying the Greek Academy, and the idea that what religion is like, that's a Stoic, that's an Epicurean, this is a Shammai Jew, this is a Hillel Jew. It's a philosophy of life. It's not really about what God is. It's not really about your picture of God. Theology is kind of not that important. What's really important is having that charismatic rabbi philosophy wisdom leader who's like, this is the way the law works, let's study it. What do you do when the woman comes in with the chicken, but she's poor, but the chicken isn't kosher? Do you tell her it's not good? Like, it's all in media res. It's like, how do we make life work? How do we live a philosophy of life? How do you teach and how do you become wise? And let's do this through a school and an academy, and then practice it. And these words like God and invisible things are not that important to it. Kabbalah is where we encounter the Neoplatonic. And that's what we're doing in this text, which is, we love the rabbi. I'm a Kabbalist, right? I love the rabbis. Absolutely. I showed you, the rabbis were Kabbalists too. We saw it in the Mishnah, where they're all contemplating and uniting with God. Or some of them are anyway. But the one thing they got wrong is we are Neoplatonic, which is, there is a hidden, invisible, identifiable structure that's controlling all of us. And they get really, really specific. So that's where I'm saying, I've done that whole thing, I'm ready to read the text. When we get to this text, we're finally encountering Kabbalah, where they're going to get so specific that this is not just like, last week I learned that I can balance Gevurah and Chesed and achieve balance in my life. Well, today you're going to learn like they're demons, and there's a whole angel structure. And it's really complex, and you better understand it, or you may end up falling victim to Naama, the demoness. And you're like, oh, I thought it was about balancing good and evil. So we're heading into the Neoplatonic, meaning there is an invisible reality like astrology, and it gets really specific. You get into numerology. You thought that number was just a number? It's more than a number. So like, there really are kind of, I would say, two Kabbalahs. One is kind of what I would call a process theology Kabbalah, which is what we've been doing. And another is like heavy duty astrology like Kabbalah, where I'm like, okay, this is what's going on. You have no clue. I'm going to read your poem. I'm going to tell you Chesed isn't Gevurah with a double dose of Yetzirah, and it really just comes down to the Partsufim and the this and that, and that's why it's going on, and now go home, come back tomorrow and give me another $20. It's more like this kind of psychic stuff. And so here we go. I have to have a copy myself. So what's the first text you have in front of you?
Sanctification.
Okay, good. So let me go to that one.
What order are they in?
That's let's go back to number 6. Go to sexual intercourse by the sages on Sabbath feasts. Okay. Zohar number 2, 89a, it says number 6, sexual intercourse. I'm going to read it because I'm going to be very dramatic. Rabbi Yudai once met Rabbi Shimon on a journey, and he said to him, stop for a second, this happens in earlier rabbinic thought. At one conference I went to ages ago, someone referred to Jewish mysticism as walking mysticism. You've got the yogic mysticism of the yoga position. You've got, I don't know, the under the Bodhi tree meditation mysticism of certain forms of Buddhism. And they said that when you see in Jewish mysticism, so you always see two people on a journey, the master and the disciple. And it relates in a way to the wandering in the desert. Because we've got creation, redemption at the Red Sea, revelation, wander. And as you're wandering, realize creation, redemption, revelation are happening all the time. And then start over the next year. And you start over the Torah, and you start over the holidays. So we're wandering. Go ahead.
Journey is not a stationary thing. Journey is a process.
That is also nicely said. And I mean, because I'm good, I really should open that. Why a journey? I was just throwing out Bamidbar, we're in the wilderness. But it's always the process. Someone said earlier something that just triggered for me. When I was at rabbinical school and I was getting really into it, and I was like doing everything hardcore, and I was becoming a rabbi, one of those little epiphanies that everyone else has already had is I realized that what the holidays are doing is that the holidays themselves are totally anticlimactic, right? The actual Seder, really, was it really that good, or was that in your imagination, right? Shavuot was nice, but second day Shavuot, such a letdown. It's like we didn't even get the Ten Commandments. You start realizing the holidays, the spiritual power is in the journey from holiday to holiday, right? Because it's like, why is Rosh Hashanah the way? I mean, actually, Tisha B'Av. If you really, I won't go into all of them, but Tisha B'Av, like, it wrecks you, and then like that is what's lingering with you as you head to Rosh Hashanah, and then you have Rosh Hashanah. I mean, come on, you really liked 4.5 hours with me? I love you, but you didn't. Okay, it's that Rosh Hashanah goes toward Yom Kippur. It's the journey between. And then you get to Yom Kippur. I do think Yom Kippur is pretty fabulous because it's so long. It's a journey in and of itself. You actually get 25 hours to experience all of it. But then 5 days later, you're living in a hut. The interesting thing is actually the transition from what I was feeling on Yom Kippur to I'm heading toward the hut, because you're already building it. There's no way that hut's going to be ready on Sukkot unless you're already out there being like, Ziva, hand me the hammer. We got more work to do, And even the halacha, you can't finish the sukkah until Yom Kippur is over. You can build almost all of it, but you can't complete it. So you complete it in the 5 days, even if it's just one twig. So, but I realized it's really all. It's like some game with chutes and ladders or whatever. It's the game of life. So you're like, it's really the journey in between where you stop, and then you keep going. And so I liked what you said because. And then once you say that, like in class, they're like, yeah, they're like 2 million rabbis already said that before. Like you didn't know that before. It's all about the journey from one to the other. And yet then a lot of people are like, I don't think about Judaism ever except on the holidays, right? How many Jews are like that? And you're like, you're missing. So for the Kabbalist, it's like, you're missing the whole thing because the whole thing is the in-between. Okay. And he said to him, Rabbi, it's written concerning Shabbat in Yeshayahu, that thus says the Lord concerning the eunuchs that keep my Sabbath, and choose the things that please me, and hold fast by my covenant. To them, and so that's a real line from Isaiah. To them, so what's up with the eunuchs who keep my Sabbaths? To them will I give my house and with my walls, it's an everlasting name. What does it mean? And he replied, you Cappadocian. So Liz, do you want to tell people what it means when you call people a Cappadocian?
What page are you on?
Oh, I'm on page 1391.
1391.
So where it says sexual intercourse, so it looks like this. So a Cappadocian is like, in the old days when we weren't politically correct, people used to make Polak jokes when I was small. A Cappadocian is, you're a dumb idiot. It's like a really nasty old slur. So it's like, you're an idiot. You're such an idiot, just tie up your ass right now and dismount, because words of Torah need a clear head, or retrace your steps and follow me and concentrate your mind, which is a Kabbalistic thing. You have to concentrate. Disciple will learn from master. He said, I embarked on this journey specifically to see my master, and by following master, I shall pursue the Shekhinah, kind of like a formula you're going to say before expanding your brain with Kabbalistic learning. He said to him, come and see, Tashma, this matter has already been taught by the companions, but they did not explain it fully. The companions in Kabbalah. So it's like, I'm going to tell you a teaching, oral teaching, to be received by the disciple that is known among the sages of Kabbalah. Thus says the Lord, who are these eunuchs who keep the Sabbath? They are the companions who study the Torah, meaning they're Kabbalists, who abstain from sexual intercourse during the 6 weekdays while they labor at the Torah, but who on Erev Shabbat prepare themselves for intercourse because they know the exalted mystery concerning the time when the consort is united with the king. The caveat is I could get everything I'm saying wrong, but I'm going to tell you what I think it says. So the king is Malkhut at the bottom, or whatever. It's the intercourse with the consort is the maybe it's not Malkhut, it's the intersection of Malkhut and Yesod. Mm-hmm. So if that's a picture of the human body, Yesod is the penis and Malkhut is the woman's genitalia. And so as I said, God is both masculine and feminine at the same time in the original Adam, and the same thing I said on Rosh Hashanah. And so it is this as being the primordial Adam image. It's not physical because the first Adam did not exist in matter form, but it is the imprint of the divine energy. And so that on Shabbat, as I said, what was special on Shabbat in the Shabbat lesson is that normally we're trying to change the constellation of the energies through our actions. But there are some times where there's like an act of grace, where something happens and there's a flow downward along the Sefirot to us, and Shabbat is one of those times. So the big thing about Shabbat is that while we're trying to get Chesed channeling, and then channeling it into Gevurah, and then into Tiferet, which is like, would be amazing if we can accomplish that. One thing that's also happening is there's a flow of momentum helping us from the divine on Shabbat, and you can feel it. It's the kind of thing that if you've ever spent Shabbat in Jerusalem and like everyone's keeping it, and you're like, this feels different. Does not feel like Haifa. This does not feel like Ann Arbor. Like I feel something really special. If only we could do this more. I gave the example once of the outage. Like you live in a city, there's a power outage, people are talking to each other, you're finding out who your neighbors are, and you say to each other, we should do this more often. And then you never do because the power goes back on. So the Kabbalists are experiencing that as this is the experience of like what it's like to be the receiver of a positive alignment of energies. Like, and you should try to make it happen more. Like, that's why God sends these messages, is so you'll be like, I have the power to do this, but will you? So, and the tzaddik does. So the two genitalia have sex with each other at midnight on Friday night. So what'll happen is, by itself, Yesod and Malkhut will start coming together, so that there is an inherent alignment of the whatever they mean, the masculine and feminine Sefirot. And I don't want to overdo with the contemporary gender categories, but let's just say that
I
much.
can't see that far. Which one is male and which one is female?
So so
I didn't bring it with me.
right. I have an extra one over there. Yesod is it's not surprising that the female, in a sense, is lower than the male on this kind of
I
chart
see.
because of the kind of sexism that goes after it. So we'll keep going. So it says, okay. They abstain. They are waiting for the time of the consort uniting with the king. That's Yesod and Malkhut. And the companions who know this mystery direct their minds toward faith in their creator. Tishby gives us a thing. They concentrate during their own intercourse on the intercourse in the upper world to attract the Shekhinah's benediction on their procreative act. So, case of imitatio Dei, I would put it more like this, which is that there's something happening in nature, and you are aligning with it. So that if the male and the female are aligning, I'm always guessing what Liz says, because I always like to think about her. She just put her brand, I was wondering, it sounds like Canaanite fertility religion. No, what were you going to say?
I'm just looking over here on page 1390. How about how if the woman enjoys herself, that's the seduction of the evil inclination.
Yes.
But if the man enjoys, that's.
So I will say that that's one text. I mean, there are other texts that are not so clear, but there is patriarchal issues going on here. Of course there is. We're talking about gender in a largely patriarchal system. So, there's going to be, debate's the wrong word. No, I'm glad you point out. There are multiple views of the role of the feminine here. And some of them are not very positive. And then some of them are. That's the truth of the matter. So, but we'll get there. And some of them are going to be really sexist. And then some of them are not so sexist. And this is one of the reasons people say don't use Kabbalah to come up with feminism. I kind of disagree, just because I think that Judaism, I believe we're in the middle of things. I don't believe these are describing you have to have the exact right model or you throw it out. I'm a Nerstilian. So my attitude is, I don't care if we let go of some of the sexist stuff, if they have images, metaphors, and thoughts that actually let me align reality in a positive way today. But I'm talking too much about meta issues. So, but on some level, the Kabbalist is connecting with what's going on in a sense in nature or in the energies, and this infuses the act of sexual intercourse itself. Blessed is the portion of the man who sanctifies himself with this holy act and knows this mystery, and come and see further. It is written, 6 days shall you labor and do all your work, but the seventh day is Shabbat of your Lord your God. Verse 1392, there it is. All your work. These 6 days are man's working days. Because of this, the Kabbalists have intercourse only when men cease from their work, and the Holy One, blessed be, begins his. What is his work? So what does it mean God's going to work on Shabbos? His work is intercourse with the consort in order to produce holy souls for the world. And therefore, in this night, the companions sanctify themselves with the sanctity of their Creator, direct their minds, and fine children are produced. Holy children, who do not veer to the right or the left, but children of the king and the consort. Concerning these, it is written, you are the children of the Lord your God. Lord your God, precisely. You are his actual children, children of the king and the consort. This is known to Kabbalists. They understand this mystery and cleave to it. Cleave is a very important word, but I'm not going to go into it. But and they are therefore called the children of the Holy One. It is they through whom the world is sustained. When the world is about...
What's the consort? Who's the consort?
The consort is Malkhut. The consort is Shekhinah or Malkhut. That's Sphira, and the king is Yesod, which I don't quite understand because Malkhut is another word for kingdom, but